Good morning and welcome to episode 6 of AI in Australia. It's been another eventful week in all things AI. Super nice to see you. Super nice to see you, Shaun. How are you doing?
Thanks, Tim. Nice to be here. It's been a busy week. Another week of training with knowledge graphs, semantic models, and AI-ready data. So, this stuff just doesn't stop, does it? So it's good to hear where we can pause and reflect on the news, what's happening around. But plenty going on, keeping us well and truly busy.
You've been in the deep in the trenches with knowledge graphs. I've been deep in the trenches building some agent applications, and I think we both realizing and have realized for a long time this stuff is tougher to do than to talk about. So really important that we keep grounded in reality about what's going on.
Yeah, exactly, and that's where I think, hence why we're doing this podcast, that people need to realize that you just can't just find shortcuts to anything with AI, whether it be a knowledge graph or a LLM or even a prompt. You do need to do some degree of training. Otherwise, it's crap in, crap out. Or as we're about to come to some articles I'm going to show you later on, you will basically not stop thinking properly in terms of creativity or problem solving. So, not every, whether this be our training that obviously we hope you to do, but any other training, learn the right things before you start going deep into AI, because at some point the wheels will fall off and your credibility and your thinking power will go down with it. So don't cut corners.
That's a fantastic springboard. And I remember 2 years ago writing about this idea that we're entering an age of super misinformation. I wrote an article about false oracles. And at the time I was writing it, I was reflecting very much on the Cambridge Analytica scandal and all the things that have been happening around social manipulation. And then these AI models came onto the scene and suddenly it just felt even worse. Now the time for bad actors or people who aren't thinking clearly about what they're doing just to create bad information and put it out into the world, it's kind of worse than ever. And I think that very much is the case. But what's making it even worse, both of us have come across this article this week, is this what they're calling the GPT effect. And this was a study that came out of MIT, where they are effectively warning about this idea of cognitive offloading. Shaun, I know you read this article as well as I did. We were both quite alarmed by it. What were your takeaways? Do you want to just touch on this article?
Yeah, it's basically not just this, but also too that like looking at how basically start with the basics. Use it or lose it. So with your brain, with creativity and problem solving, and obviously with AI doing a lot of problem solving, if you don't use parts of your brain, you lose that ability to solve problems that you don't always have your computer next to, or for AI. I was quite alarmed by, and we'll put the study in the article in the show notes. I really recommend anybody have a read of it. Whether it be a junior person learning AI versus executive delegating, I was really surprised just how much of an impact, when looked at the study of those people who are just purely looking at LLMs and not using their thinking power, versus on the flip side, on the positive side, those who are only using their brain power, as in human thinking, and weren't using AI, how big the gap was between the two groups. And then when they were given a task at the end of the study of, okay, those people who are using the brain only with all the different experiments, at the end, now you can use an LLM and look at the brain activity, versus those who only use the LLMs for all the experiments and then would solve a human brain only problem solving. How big the gap was in terms of those thinking ability in your brain. The LLM people, the thinking ability had decreased massively, and the people who are using the human brain were actually able to perform better with an LLM. So, and then the scary part is that this was only a small study. That imagine, and here we are, like AI. It's only been around, so not AI, but the ChatGPTs and the Geminis of the world, have only been around for a couple of years. Imagine if people over 2 or 3 years, this pattern where people became more reliant and just threw everything into a chatbot or a LLM, how much our brain starts to turn off, versus those who I think normally we're going to see a huge decreasing in human ability, which our brain can't be replicated by AI, versus those who need to have their still creativity and collaboration, that people's part of that brain to be turned off. So it's pretty scary in terms of our population of thinkers, creativity, and problem solving. What that's going to be happening with AI becoming more and more widespread and adopted for people who are unaware of this. What's your take on it, Tim? Because I'm more concerned as well as surprised, given that this is coming out so early on, and we're not even in adopting AI to its full potential yet.
I mean, I suppose the early hope was that these technologies would come along and the kind of value distribution across the populations would be quite even. And I think the more that I'm seeing of what's happening, and this is across all different dimensions, so whether it's where the economic value is going to go or where the intellectual value is going to go, it just seems that it isn't going to be nicely and evenly distributed. And kind of what's playing out here is just an example of how, I don't know if you ever watched that movie, it was called Idiocracy, where some guy goes to sleep and he wakes up in the future and suddenly, I mean, he was a very average Joe and he had an IQ of 100 and he woke up in 50 years and everyone had like started drinking sugary cool drinks and watching TV. And he was like a super genius because everyone had become so dumb because they'd kind of outsourced all of their thinking to television, and like they were like just a bunch of boneheads. Like it was a vision for the gone wrong. And like in a way, this reminds me of that. It's like there's going to be a segment of society here that's just going to stop thinking because they don't need to anymore. So now you've got this tool that can think for you. So what a rational person should do is say, well, me plus machine equals something great. And that's the augmented person we're talking about, the person who learns how the tuning works and retains their critical thinking, but uses this as an enabler. But unfortunately, what seems to be happening is a lot of people are embracing this like in a very lazy fashion, and they're just using it not think. And like you described, use it or lose it. It's like muscle wasting. You know, I once broke my arm. I put it in a cast. Within 3 days, the muscles start to atrophy from not being used. I think it's even less. It's something like 24 hours. And I think the brain is probably quite similar. Like I think that, but you stop losing those pathways, those neural pathways don't get worn, and then they don't fire anymore. So I think it's very alarming. And I think the reason I linked it back to this original idea of writing about the age of misinformation is that if people aren't thinking critically, you'd not notice how much of what's out there at the moment is just rubbish, quite frankly, rubbish. LLM generated, somebody sat down, they wrote a prompt and they didn't even bother to read the answer. And that is getting pushed out. It's creating like an information pollution kind of out in the public domain where unverified LLM generated gumph is kind of polluting the world. And I think we need to be quite careful with that.
Exactly. It's using an analogy like just when you talk about pollution, and a lot of people don't, because they haven't done training, don't even realize how your LLMs are actually working. But if you say the more people are polluting information out there with the LLMs trained upon, it's almost like you're living in a house and then people are polluting exhaust and pollutants out in the air, and you keep just like, I'm going to keep breathing this in. This is great. And next minute, when you get sick, like after 2 years, going, I've got this horrible virus. Where did it come from? It's like, well, do you even know what you're breathing in? And it's similar to bring it back to AI space. If you think, the AI is all amazing, I can send emails to my boss, I can get reports for clients. This is amazing, without even checking that. Do you actually know the crap that's being trained upon as well as the good stuff? It's like crap in, crap out, or there's bias in the data, and as we're more using it, that pollution is getting bigger and bigger. And you don't understand how the LLM and AI is actually working. Hence why the smart companies that we're training with, particularly like some of the banks here that are asking us to, hey, can you train us up on, and investing a lot of time and effort about knowledge graphs and semantic models, stuff that goes under AI, so that they can actually have that critical thinking. People need to do the same thing to follow those patterns, to be responsible, to be explaining what they're doing with AI, but also to not just to have crap in, crap out.
There's a real, I love the word epistemology. I use it a lot. It just sounds fancy. But epistemology is really the study of knowledge, of understanding what's real and what's grounded. And I think what you're touching on is so important, because I think that we have an epistemology problem. I think we've got a moment in time where we're losing people aren't applying the rigor, whether it's in organizations linking their knowledge to foundational epistemological groundings, where I can say that this response I'm getting back for a customer is grounded through knowledge graph in a fact about the customer, or whether it's a comment on social media, which is quite frankly just hallucinated. And the architecture of LLMs is such that they will always hallucinate. And I'm willing to have a debate with anybody on that. The current generation of LLMs, hallucination is not a bug in the system. It's fundamental. It is what all they do. All that LLMs do is generate language. And when that language doesn't map back to something that we know to be true, we call it an hallucination. But it's all an hallucination. And Shaun and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier on, where I was saying I'm building some really cool product here around travel. You know, it's an interest of mine, a multi-agent system, and I've got a really sophisticated product building here where I'm helping to solve travel. The product's going to be called Solve My Travel. So wait and see what that comes. But right now, you can generate on the same instructions, you can get such divergent responses on multiple rolls of the dice. And if you think about a multi-agent system where you've got 3 agents in a row dealing with a particular task that they're given, and each of those produces an output that's got a probability distribution range of X. As you pass that along from agent to agent to agent, that probability space just gets bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of what the outcome can be on the other side. So you don't produce really deterministic responses on multiple rolls of the dice here. And I just don't know that this nuance or this fundamental of how language models works is fully understood. If I make it really simple, if I go to a GPT and I say something like, tell me who the 5, someone gave me this example the other day, I love it. Who were the 5 longest presidents? And you prompt that in. There's so much in that, and you'll get a list. It will say, okay, it was Trump, and then this and this and this, and the LLM will interpret it. It'll think longest to mean how tall they were in one instance. In another instance, because the vector spaces between what longest might mean and what it generates is similar between height and between longest serving, you'll get a totally different output, which talks about how long the person served. Then you'll also find that there's no anchoring in truth. So even if you're just talking about the height of the presidents, you're going to get a reordering. Sometimes somebody else will swap out because there's no factual basis to this stuff. So we need to, if we just go back to where we started here, like now is a more important time than ever to be careful with what we think we know and with what we're putting out there. And it's not a time to go and outsource our brains to LLMs. It's a time to really build the skills that we need to know how to coexist, to enable our thinking processes, and to use this as a way to augment us, not to outsource. And you're going to see this bifurcation happening where you're going to get some really, really good teams and really, really good early adopters producing really superhuman results. And then you're going to see this middle zone, which is going to be like just polluted with rubbish. And I think that's warning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the pattern's being repeated even before AI. So as a lot of people know, I'm a huge wearable adopter. And Tim and I often talk about what goes through our Garmin with our runs and these things. But sometimes, and like I wear, just for people's context, I'm wearing Apple Watch and Whoop and Aura. And I don't love these devices. It's more that I can't trust one device over another. So if I just looked at, for those who know about the Aura Ring, which tracks your sleep and these things, it gives you a score each day of a sleep score out of 100. So if you looked at, and use that as an analogy, if I looked every day and one day I got a score of 70, and it says, hey, Shaun, you're overreached yesterday, take it easy. And then you go, oh shit, I got a big run to do today. I better take it easy and not do anything. As opposed to that ring could be in a different position on your finger. There's so many things that could have gone wrong that the data underneath it is actually, well, AI is not a hallucination, but it's not always factual. And the same thing, would it be using a wearable like your Garmin watch or an Aura ring, all the way up to AI, that you need to have a human override to say that actually I'm feeling okay. The other things could be impacting this thing. This is only a guide. And that's when we should be taking these computer generated outputs, the LLM or AI or a wearable that they're all giving you scores, or now they all have AI chatbots. Hey, Shaun, you had a really bad sleep last night. Is everything okay? And then you start stressing out going, oh my God, I had really bad sleep, as opposed to there could be other things impacting that data that hasn't captured, that is missing, that would give a more impactful and full response. So you always need to have, but you mentioned the other week, Tim, the human must always be in the loop.
Yeah.
So that you always need to have your brain to override to say, does this make sense? Or what other things could contribute to this, rather than take everything at face value, whether it be a score on your phone for Aura Ring or your web devices, or a chatbot, ChatGPT, giving you a set of responses to it and going, okay, yep, I must take it and then run with it. There needs to be our brain to actually rationalize, say, does this make sense? Is this appropriate to where it's going to be going to? Or can I add other things as a guide? I know what your take, Tim, because
I think that's right.
There's not this brand. This stuff isn't this brand new about AI. It packs other things that we rely upon for automation and intelligence.
I suppose where my mind goes is to say, like, what's the take home lesson for me? So we do live in this world now where thinking, to some extent, has been democratized. Okay, let's call it thinking, like the task of generating what look like thoughts. So anybody can go onto ChatGPT now, and I was having a debate with a good friend of mine the other day about Maxwell's equations. Okay, they're meant to be the most elegant equations, and they're really elegant. Like, you look at them and they're like a single line.
Yeah.
And they're described as these things where, like, if you understand them, you look at them and you're like, wow, that is so beautiful, like what he did there. So a friend of mine and I said, well, what is Maxwell's equation? And then you go and ChatGPT it looks pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And then you dig a layer deeper and you say, well, how much calculus do I need to actually understand what's going on here? And it ended up giving me, I've got some university maths. I mean, I think I'm a relatively snappy thinker. And it still gave me a 6-week course, which I looked at and I thought, geez, there's going to be a lot of work to actually get to a point where I understand Maxwell's equations. But if I didn't know to ask, I might have looked at it and thought, oh, I understand Maxwell's equations. That's pretty simple. It's just a line of like little squigglies. That was pretty easy. So I suppose the take-home lesson would be, when you're reading this stuff, don't make you need to be clear on the distinction between what you actually understand and what's being produced on the other side of an LLM prompt. So don't think because it came out really, you typed it and it came out that's your knowledge. That's not your knowledge. If you can't read it and understand it and work out whether or not it's right, then you're kind of in a domain that's pretty dangerous, because you're taking thoughts of something that in that moment is cleverer than you, without the ability to distinguish the fact from the fiction. So how would you know if it's wrong? That could be my question. I think the overlay, the message to the user would be to say, or to anybody listening to this podcast, is when you read the result of a prompt, are you able to defend what you're reading and replay it in a way that you actually understand what it has said? And for the first thing there is, have you actually read it? Did you actually read the whole thing? Because does the middle paragraph start rhyming in iambic pentameter? You didn't even notice it. Like, or is it real? And then secondly, if you have read the whole thing, like, do you actually agree with it? Like, you can't subordinate all of your thinking to these LLMs. You need to augment it. So I suppose that would be my quite wordy explanation of what I think. I think we need to make sure we actually understand what's coming out the other side.
Well, exactly. And also to answer back to what we talked about at the start of today about the importance of training. So when I've asked ChatGPT and Gemini to provide some answers for things, I scan through it, and sometimes 80%, oh, this is great, but there's some words where I know that this word doesn't actually fit this type of structure when I'm doing something, and because I know from training that these words don't go together for in reality. And it's back to your question there before, Tim. If somebody asks, why are these things two connected?
Yeah.
If I go, I know AI just told me the answer, your credibility is going to go down the toilet. As opposed to when I'm looking at it going, it's mostly there, but I don't need it. I'm not going to take these two concepts together, because that's not how it works in reality. It may be in theory or what people have put out there, but that's not how it works. And then back to your credibility. If somebody asks, why have you done this way? Well, that's how things work in a more accurate and faster way. So they're always like to be attention to detail, or just to overall read the script of a prompt. You need to override in terms of how does it fit your purpose? Who's the audience? And what's your knowledge that you've learned already? So it fits it like in a seamless way, rather than, as you say, Tim, just replace one with the other, like an artificial implant. The body rejects most implants. The same thing for AI. Don't implant other people's thoughts. into your work.
Totally. So maybe a way to think about this is when you talk about agentic systems, agentic, that's going to become a banned word on this podcast because everyone's using it like it's
Exactly, yeah.
But when people talk about agentic systems, they talk about a human in the loop, right? And the idea is that if you've got an automated system going, don't automate the whole thing. Make sure you've got a fail safe and a person to look at it and make sense of it, right? But maybe when it comes to thinking about how do we use these tools, we should start coming up with this concept of like the human pilot. I like that, the human in the cockpit. So who's actually in charge of the conversation? Because if you're just going in and letting the stuff do all the thinking, you're not even in charge, right?
Yeah.
So, and if I think about this in relation to teams, like I used to have the benefit and the joy of working with some very talented teams, sometimes very big teams. And what I think I was sometimes good at is setting directions. So I could say, like, I know we need to go into that area. Let's think about this more deeply. You go and investigate that part about the maths of it, because I'm not clever enough to do the maths. You go and have a look at the viability of the code, like what, for example, what language do we use? Does it need to be compiled? What sort of database structures? But I know we need to solve for speed, blah, blah, safety, da, 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 da. But I was still authoring the coordination of the parts and then going to subject matter experts to lift out stuff I couldn't do and then bring it back up. And then we'd say, how do we sequence it together? Now, maybe that's a way to think about using these models is to say, I still need to have that. I still need to be human in the cockpit. I still need to say, what am I trying to do? How am I going to get there? What are the pieces I don't know? Let me get them back from my team. But let me also have the right KPIs and the right, not KPIs. Let me have the right processes in place that I can check that what's coming back from my teams, this time not teams, LLMs, is good work. Don't just assume it's good work. I wouldn't have done that if I was working with a team of grads or whatever else it is. I would have had to still vet it. So maybe we need to still apply that same kind of thinking now.
Exactly. It's it's adapting how we work rather than replacing the way we work. And because we hear so many, and study also talked about how so many companies are becoming all into AI or what's the word that we talked about the other week, Tim? But I think it was Canva saying where not AI native, but basically they were becoming like the
I think it was AI native,
but it's that. And in a way, you don't really want to be that way in terms of if you're going to basically put your sticking with the pilot analogy, Tim, your company onto autopilot. Then what's your IP? What's your brand standing for? It's like, oh, what do you guys? What do you do? Oh, we're all about AI. So we're basically we just outsource everything to our agents or other people's brains. I don't think itself. Like that effectively. If you're going to become an AI native company, then you basically are selling your brand out to the street, and whoever people's going to pollute their data or thoughts, then you're going to suck it in and you're going to sell it for other people's price, and that's not how I would like to run a company.
So a huge regression to the mean here, which has no value. So once everybody has got the same democratized access to all of these LLMs and is doing what we described, which is like the latest version of engaging with them, you have got zero competitive advantage, zero. So how do you stay ahead of the curve? You need to make sure that you are doing things on top of the tooling to make the tooling more valuable. And that's you as an individual, you as a person in the workforce, you as a person running a company, all of those different domains. Anyway, I think it's a big warning. It's not one for us to trifle over. And I think the hallucination problem remains. It becomes, the problem is it gets...
let's say our podcast here is to get people to being sitting on the fence, to put you out there and make your own decisions. But I definitely, for this article, I definitely want everybody to at least have a read of it, have your thoughts. It's very simple to understand, and it comes down to how do you put yourself in the article. When you read this article, how would you like your brain to be? And when I read this, I had a very clear view of where I want to stand in terms of where my brain goes down the track. It made me more aware about how I want to use AI as well as my kids. So yeah, like everything else, reflect on it and think like as we do, inform you about what you want to do next, because these things are changing all the time. We all have a choice. You're not forced to use AI. You're not forced to like use ChatGPT. Same with social media. How much swiping you want to do every day. Don't be a passenger sitting on these trains.
I've got a nice analogy for us to lean into the sports theme. So this is all about passive versus active engagement. And that's why memory recall and things are so poor, because people are so passive. And it's a bit like, if you fast forward 4 years' time, you're going to have your humanoid robot, right? And it's going to be walking around the house. this passive engagement is like saying, I sent my humanoid robot for a 5K run. Why didn't I get any fitter? Versus I went for a tailored run with my humanoid robot who set the pace, and I'm really benefiting from this personalized training. So like that's kind of the distinction. The one is outsourcing the work, the other is using it to augment your own work.
That's actually exactly that. Or like I put my my smartwatch on my robot, went for a run, and it was like great. I'm getting the comes up. It's like, hey, but I'm not losing any weight. I'm not getting my VO2. So it's like, well, yeah, you need to do the work. The robot tells you what you need to do, but the robot's going to do it for you. If you want, if you want to get the benefits from actually the work, and that's the same as your brain. That if you want to think creatively and smartly and be a leader, then have that be a guide and not a replacement.
Yeah. Okay, well, should we move on? I mean, I think one of the interesting things that's happened this week, and this we're really just going to do a bit of a roundup on the news, but was it 2 or 3 weeks ago we had a conversation about Grok? I think you said to me, what's going on with this? Why they're not on the map? Yeah. And I said, just watch this space, or if I didn't say it, I should have. And so that space has come, and Grok 4 has been launched this week, which is very interesting. And look, the prevailing thinking in the market at the moment is this is a function of compute and training data, right? So if you own the compute, which Elon's done, he went and bought the biggest server farm of Blackwell chips and powered it up. I think he had 1,000 GPUs, and I think they're looking to take that to some ridiculous number, like 1 million.
Jeez.
Okay, and then they trained it on the same corpus of all the data in the world.
Yep.
So it's been trained on all the data in the world plus X's data as well. So they've got all of the tweets and everything that gives them a bit of a difference. And then I think we'll come to it now, but Elon's been talking about building a world model, which is different to an LLM, which might derive out of video that comes from Dojo, which is a supercomputer that drives Tesla. But very interesting, they dropped Grok 4, and it now looks like if the race was being led by OpenAI, Google with Gemini, and then Anthropic's Claude, it now looks like there's a fourth horse in the race, and in number one position is Grok. So Grok now looks to be the best performing LLM, just like that. There it is.
Yeah.
Elon is quoted as saying that Grok is better than most humans and most PhD humans in all domains. So I mean that's quite a big claim. Yeah, quite a big claim.
Well, it's just like I like how you talked about the big claim that Sam Altman talked about in his letter. So these and I know Eric from Google made some big claims the other week too. Like, what's with these AI / entrepreneurs, leaders making big claims? I think is it like they cry for, hey, what about me? What about me on the stage? And versus trying to get their own brand to be embraced. It's
look, I think there's a lot riding on it. I mean, I was reading yesterday that OpenAI is still a loss-making business. I mean, if you look at the amount of money that's going into this land grab, there's this thesis, right, that these pioneer, I call them the pioneer labs, there's other words for it, but let's call it the front runner labs that are building their own models. There is a thesis underpinning all of this that these guys are going to take almost all of the economic value available in the world, and they're gonna get it, right? 7 or 8 or maybe 3 or 4 of them. So just imagine what those investor fundraising rounds must look like. I mean, you're basically telling the investors that all of the money in the world is basically going to flow to you. Just pour in all of this money.
Yeah.
But then what happens is, like, society, even if your models are that good, society doesn't respond that quickly. And society doesn't respond that quickly because it's dangerous. People don't want to be replaced. Like, we mustn't underestimate the social inertia here. You came to me and said, Tim, you can replace yourself in all domains with something that's better. Do you want to do it? I'd say, no, I want to earn the money. Go away. Take your robot away from me.
Yeah.
So I think that rhetoric you're talking about with these pioneer labs, these big egos in these pioneer labs, it's also financial pressure. Now, these guys have to deliver economic miracles to their overlords, and make no mistake, they've got overlords. Yeah.
Well, exactly, and this is where people need to again just read between the lines. Just because it's the best doesn't mean I should be using it. Because now, like I said, now we got a choice of not just AI, but you got Gemini, you got Grok, and you got OpenAI.
Yeah.
So people get, it's almost like going to a kid in a candy store. Oh, I've got all this candy around me. Where do I, what can I eat? And as opposed to, should I even go into the candy store altogether on it to be healthy?
Yeah.
So please, people, don't just because there's more out there, and now Grok come to the table. That you need to feel the pressure of embracing it more. The same as social media, when we had this Facebook and then Instagram. and yet and then Snapchat, just because it's more out there doesn't mean that you need to indulge in it. There needs to be some discipline about it. You do have a human brain that you can be using, and face-to-face people, as nothing can replace human context. The human brain,
That's right.
with emotion and collaboration, can't be replicated.
Start with what problems do you want to solve, and then go to the tooling to see how it can help.
Yep,
I just want to introduce our audience to this concept here. So there's this benchmark. So all of these models, when we said that Grok 4 is now in position number 1, there are lots of different benchmarks. But there's quite an interesting one, which we'll post in the show notes here. The URL is agi.safe.ai. And this is considered, there was obviously the Turing test, which was this idea developed by Alan Turing, that you'd be able to build a computer where the person asking questions of the computer would not be able to work out whether or not they were talking to a computer or not. Okay, that was meant to be the test for artificial intelligence. But we've long blown past that now. You can get a bot to easily convince in most instances, a person that they are real. So now what's happened is there's been a collaboration that built something called Humanity's Last Exam. And Humanity's Last Exam is damn difficult. If you go and have a look at it, it's like domains inside very specialist areas. I have like really difficult maths problems, like super complicated biology problems asking about different reactions. So if we just have a look here, here's like the first one. Looks like a picture of the Rosetta Stone or something. It says, here is a representation of a Roman inscription originally found on a tombstone. Provide a translation for the Polymyrene script. A transliteration of the text is provided here. So I mean, I don't even know what they're talking about, right? So these are the types of questions, and there are lots of them. Here you can see another one in ecology. Hummingbirds with apodoformes uniquely have bilaterally paired ovine bones. A semisoid embedded in the caudolateral portion of the expanded cruciate aponeurosis of the insertion of M depressive chordae. How many paired tendons are supported by the sesamoid bone? Answer with a number. Okay, so I mean, like, I guess if you're like a bird geek, maybe you would just know the answer. It seems unlikely to me. But where I wanted to go is the best performer on this exam so far is Gemini 2.5 Pro, which gets an accuracy of 21.6%, which is fairly low, but pretty good for a human, right? If you're going to write this thing, I think I'd be surprised if it got that high. I have heard rumors that Grok 4 got 46% for this test. 46%.
Really? Like that was,
and it's its last exam. So we'll see what the official benchmarks come out with.
Let's next week's revelation. Let's watch this space. Let's see, put Grok under the pump.
Yeah.
So geez, I couldn't even pronounce half those words, let alone work out that problem solving of those questions. So
that's fine. Yeah, that's definitely developing at a rapid pace. Shaun, I wanted to touch on another thing. I saw this week that there were some advances in EU regulation. So we've been calling this for a while as well. I think it was just a matter of time. And if we just cast our minds back, there was a call for a pause right in the beginning. There were lots of people who said we need to slow down. But some of the foundational model rules take effect next month, I think it is, with the EU. Again, the EU is saying that I think by 2026, what they've done is they've said that they classify models according to risk. I mean, it's a risk-based model. And they are saying that this stuff is going to be enacted legislatively soon. Just worth noting that in South Africa, in Australia, not in South Africa, more in Australia, right now, all we have is kind of the 10 guardrails, which are sort of opt-in guardrails. I mean, how do we see this landscape evolving? What are your views there? It feels quite soft considering Australian regulation right now. I mean, surely
I'm actually having. I was talking to some of the banks about this last week about how the framework is how their framework is benchmarking to the Europe frameworks, or are they looking at the US, and are we in between? I'm actually having a meeting with some of them next week. So, but yeah, it's from like the network I was at the other week about the governance. There's no real clear view of like where are we going in Australia. It's just like people in these governments are saying wait and see, and most organisations will, unless they get told they're not going to have guardrails, unless like across the bare minimum. People seem to be quite flexible. So yeah, it's a tough one. I think we watch this space, but hence that when we start seeing things unfolding, like anything else, when there's a big crisis or something happens really bad with a company, people be like, oh, guardrails, where are they?
Yep.
Whereas right now, it's just like people are waiting for things to happen, as opposed to, oh, everything's working fine. We don't need guardrails.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a prediction here. So we start with guardrails. Let's just dial back the clock a little bit and think about things like GDPR, and then all of the legislation on protecting personal information. I got a very nicely handwritten letter from the CEO of Qantas this week. I don't know if you did, about my information being distributed.
Yeah.
So it was very nice of them.
Big
But
breach, yeah.
But if you think about how the world and Australia has dealt with legislating around protection of personal information,
Yeah.
normal anatomy is that the stuff starts with guidelines, then bad things happen, like you've mentioned. Bad things happen, and then the legislators come in and say, well, we can't allow bad things to happen, so we're going to legislate the hell out of it. And I think that the lesson to take as in any organization is ignore those guardrails at your peril, because the legislation will be a tighter constriction of the guardrails. So what the guardrails are general direction. They say you need to consider the ethics and you need to consider a whole bunch of things when you build. What will then happen is the legislative noose will be a constraint on top of that. It'll be a subset of that. It'll be a stricter version of what you see in the guardrails. But if you're already building around the guardrails, that will probably mean that your design principles are able to deal with the legislation rather than be a catastrophic shock to your business when they come along. So I would ignore them. I would take them as a harbinger of things to come, but that the legislation will be led by things that have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And we can speculate what they'll be, right? So we'll know what because of the probabilistic nature of these LLMs and people are experimenting on the edges, they will produce unexpected results. So maybe that will mean somebody applying for credit gets too much credit. They do something clever, prompt into a little chatbot, and they get a home loan for $20 million house when they can only afford little, and then they go buy a house with that. So it'd be stuff like that where it goes outsides of the edges of what you expect it to do. So timeline-wise here, I can't see this being so long, Shaun. I mean, surely the legislators are just chomping on the bit to pass something here to tighten up the landscape in Australia.
Yeah. I think the pressures with the other governments too, and with the EU generally being a lot more conservative. I think the pressures are when people are saying, "Hey, the EU is going so far beyond Australia, we can't be an island by ourselves." Basis now, we're going to do our own. There's not enough expertise in Australia, from my view, to actually come up with our own legislation. We need to inherit, or at least we'll lean on global standards in this space. When, as you said, there's so many things that can go wrong. Why wait for things to go wrong before we start saying, "Oh shit, we should have adopted these things like EU or the US."
Yeah. Okay, that's great. I think the only other thing that maybe is worth just touching on at the moment in the news is just this idea of what's really going on in the job market. And I think that what we'll start to do is on a quarterly basis just dip into some sort of key statistics. There's a lot of noise in the job market at the moment. There was an announcement that Telstra had let go. I think they're talking about 500 people, followed by the media headline to say this is not because of AI. Look, my read on these things is as soon as somebody says it's not because of something, it usually is because of something. Say the thing you don't mean, but it feels to me like what is brewing at the moment is sort of a bit of a tension between businesses that are trying to automate work and people who don't want to be automated. And I think that tension will continue to develop, where it's one thing to think that you can just simply automate processes and automate people out of their jobs, but there are also rational actors sitting inside organizations who understand those consequences. And those actions may not be taken for many different reasons, for union pressure reasons, for the fact that the person sitting in the role who works out how to automate their own role may not make that move themselves. So I'm anticipating, Shaun, I love your views, and I'm anticipating that the job market disruption is going to be over-predicted by the pioneer labs, because there's an economic interest for them to say, look, we're going to automate all of this white-collar work and we're going to capture all of the value, and look how good it is. It's as good as a PhD. And I think they're going to over-forecast the job disruption. And I think what's going to happen on the ground is it's going to be much more messy, and you're not going to find people getting disrupted quite as fast as perhaps the technology can, because of all sorts of social dynamics that are going to come in. Yeah.
No, it's I definitely agree with you. I think bringing it back to You know, working in this data space for over 20 years, like look at in the 2000s when digital became the big thing. As much everything digital. Remember those digital office where we're not going to be the paperless office. Everything's going to be digital.
Yep.
Paper. Everything's going to be like this. Send email back and forth. I remember like the CEO of a company I was working for back then says, "Sure, can you write us a white paper about how we're going to all become digital and in our office, I don't want to have people do print off anything. We'll just be purely on our iPads and digital. And look where we are. There's still reading paper everywhere. Photocopiers are pushing out. People still want books, like feel so. Right, the social element to this, as well as the human of, hey, I want to deal with the human, as well as when the agents and talk about like agentic AI, not being so reliable. You can't just say, oh, it's fully embedded. This whole trust and people's reputation of a company is going to put on guardrails. So I think it's well and truly going to be like well past its inflation, and it's going to be like people going to be pushing back, then adopting, pushing back again, until we find it like it's going to be a tool in our organizations, but by no means replacing big chunks of departments or units. Just because of there's so many things that are interrelated, a bit like a graph that we can't foresee. But from experience, as a history repeats, this is another technology trend that I think will follow the same way.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's kind of just because the technology might be able to doesn't mean it will. I think that there's kind of like a non sequitur there that people are assuming it will. I have read, and again, this might just be like, a Pioneer Lab hyperbole, that GPT-5 is coming. So there's been a bit of I think Elon was quick to launch Grok 4, and now there's a lot of pressure in OpenAI to launch
horse race
5. But they're saying, I read this, I mean, if we could make money every time we were right here, but I read something that said that you will truly be able to build a naught-man business with this is how capable GPT-5 is. You'll just tell it build me a business, and it'll have access to all of the tools and all of the, get itself into LinkedIn, blah, 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 and go and do it. But the day that happens, I think will be the day we've crossed some form of Rubicon, where you've got these models that are actually able to do something kind of on their own in the world. I still think that they're going to be tools of the trade for quite a long time yet. But let's see. The guys in the trenches are saying the stuff is evolving faster than anyone believed, and the change is going to be more significant than any of us thought. I'm a bit wary. We'll see.
Let's get a crystal ball. And so, as we've joked about, a lot of these leaders actually haven't worked in large corporations before. They're sitting in their innovation labs and there's tech. A bit like that talking about TV shows like Silicon Valley. If you watch that TV series, that people who sit in their bunkers, also everything's crystal clear. When you come down to large organizations and when you have legacy systems and data that they haven't thought about, and what about this? Oh, we haven't thought about that one. Then that reality very quickly catches up to them. So yeah, I don't see too much of that happening anytime soon. But as I said, we're here to see what happens. But we also need to be cautious about sometimes, do we want it to happen? That's the other thing too.
Absolutely right. And I think we've got some choice in that. I don't think it's
we're not robots.
So maybe in our closing, I wanted to share one more very interesting story, which did absolutely catch my attention this week, which was a band called the Velvet Sundown. I don't know if you've come across the Velvet Sundown. Somebody flicked this to me. This is what they look like. A lot of their album covers, this is a picture of, this is the band here. So these slightly soft focused. And then a lot of their album covers, they had sort of a spoof on what looked like Abbey Road. And then that, you can see, have a look at some of this album artwork here. Anyway, what's interesting about this band is their music's nice, it's nice to listen to. And, we can find them on Instagram quickly. I just want to show you a little bit of the image. They managed to get themselves 700,000 listeners or downloads, or whatever you'd call it, Sundown on Instagram, in a month. They launched this month in June, or late June. There you can see all of their artwork, but their artwork's a bit weird. You can see it just looks a bit
back in the
AI generated. Look at this image. So this is a spoof on Queen. That's a spoof on some Beatles albums. They're all spoofs. Anyway, it turns out that this week the band doesn't exist and the music is all AI generated. So this is a 100% AI generated music band marketing exercise. The whole caboodle end to end. And it's the first time I felt like AI has stolen something from me. I sat down and I listened to a track and thought, that's really nice. And then when I discovered it was AI generated, I felt like I'd been robbed. For some reason that crossed the line for me. I just didn't like it.
Well, exactly. Imagine going to a concert and go, oh, I'm going to see this AI band play live. Like, it's just, end of the day, and this is where sometimes you can't sort of like, there's things like a tool that is great for background list music, but then the real bands that when you actually go see them live, like my number one thing is to hear live music, that you can't beat that. And also, when to hear the actual artists and watch them perform, that's because these AI can be the top charts in the Spotify's. When it comes down to it, like, hey, we're going to have a AI jam with to put all the other AI virtual agents and watch them on stage. Are we going to watch them? Of course we're not. So
no.
That's where humans want to interact with humans. There's a place for these type of things, but interesting, like I said, like where people, like when they find out about it, that the reaction is going to be a little bit different. Even though the music's great, they're going to listen to it and then think this is really, I'm going to follow it. Versus like Taylor Swift or those band, which Tim, I recommend you go see them in November. AC/DC, one of the big classic rock bands from years back there. They've sold out 2 concerts in Australia, 100,000 people. I want to forget that. That you won't see an AI band get as big as them when it's on the stage. People, their performers. So, end of the day, humans rock the show, and the AI is going to be considered on the fence.
My son is learning Thunderstruck on the guitar, and the idea that he's trying to learn those really fast riffs. If that was AI generated, just where does that, like, that's not even interesting. Some computer generated it versus a Brian May guitar solo or something.
Exactly.
Human behind the emotion, behind the music.
Exactly, like a human brain. We're made up of emotion. We're made up like when the artist performs certain acts, which is this impromptu. And ad hoc, like that's what you can't put a finger about how do people react that they loved or disliked, versus an AI, which is an algorithm where everything's a pattern of trends. We don't always follow patterns and trends. We sometimes like to work off the beaten track. So try and put that in ChatGPT.
I've got one random question for you before we go, because that's been something that's been fascinating me. 2 questions. I want to put you on the spot. The first question is, how much power do you think Grok 4 uses?
Is there a multiple choice? Because I wouldn't even
I don't know the answer. I'm googling it quickly, but I'll give you an idea. It's so much power that they are trying to start to build some of these labs directly next to nuclear power stations. That's part of the future planning, so that they will just be fed by these nuclear power stations, or these supercomputers, right? But my next question was going to be, how much power do you think the human brain uses to produce all of its stuff, if you measure it in watts? So if you think about like a little old school light bulb was 100 watts, what do you reckon the brain uses?
I told you I'm not very smart with these type of things. I said I have to look more ordering for that one. I don't know. Are we looking at 1,000 watts?
That's a lot. 20 watts. So the human brain uses between 20 and 30 watts, which is just a dim light bulb, which I know many people have been accused of being dim light bulbs. I have in my past as well. But it said 20 to 30 watts of power energy is used to produce these things we have in our heads, these world simulators that can compute better than most of these machines. And then you've got Grok 4 and all of these other pioneer models that are using up almost all of the energy that would be provided by small countries. So it does make you wonder if we're on the right path here. There's something quite special about the human brain.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I say hence why we come back to keep back to creativity and how the brain. We still don't understand how the brain works in terms of like all the different brain waves and connectivity, and how I say when you look at how you train a model, but how a human brain can pick up a picture in an instant, whereas you got to train a model over and over again that, hey, this is not a puppy face, this is actually a muffin. So that's where human default. It should be the mantra.
Content in the brain as well. I think there's some very interesting stuff there. Anyway, it's been lovely to chat, Shaun.
We've covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah.
It's good to say, like, the AI circus, as we talked about, gets bigger and bigger. So a lot of articles people to read on the weekend. But at least please reflect as you start getting onto the circus. Don't just be taken for a ride. In all seriousness, because as I said, as we come out with a lot of these things, I don't even know half these things. Hence, we're doing this podcast where Tim will pick up stuff and I'll pick up stuff that we don't know what everything's going on. But please be educated, be aware, and do your training. Otherwise, bad things will happen, and we don't want that to happen to you, especially for our community that is about leaders and things doing the right way, not the cowboys out there trying to cut corners.
Reach out to us if it's in your personal capacity. You want to ask some questions. We'd always be happy to be a sounding board. And of course, AI in Australia, our business, incorporated in the ACT, provides commercial masterclasses as well. So if you do have any needs on that front, please reach out to us. And we're going to go back into masterclass mode next week. I think we'll toggle between news roundups, interesting topics, and then last week we did some cool slides showing how to identify AI opportunities. We'll be back into that mode next week. Stay safe and stay warm.
And stay warm in this cold winter. And happy reading over the weekend, Tim, and enjoy, and keep running with some real human activity, not the AI activity. And we'll speak to everybody next week.
Wonderful. Keep well, everybody. Bye.